When Victoria Hamilton brought her luxury BMW to Thompson Auto Service for routine maintenance, she took one look at Marcus Thompson working under the hood and immediately demanded to speak to a real mechanic. The sight of a black man in coveralls touching her $80,000 car triggered every prejudice Victoria carried about who belonged around expensive vehicles. What she didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just any mechanic, he was a former automotive engineer with degrees from MIT, who owned the entire garage and employed 15 people. But Victoria was about to learn this lesson the hard way, because 20 minutes after she stormed out in disgust, her properly serviced car would break down on the highway, leaving her stranded and forced to call the very man she just insulted. Sometimes karma arrives with a tow truck and a very expensive lesson about judging people by their appearance. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine bay doors of Thompson Auto Service as Victoria Hamilton pulled her pearl-white BMW X7 into the service area. The $85,000 luxury SUV gleamed under the fluorescent lights, its chrome accents reflecting the immaculate condition of a vehicle that had never seen anything more challenging than suburban shopping trips and country club parking lots. Victoria stepped out of her car with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. At 45, she was the wife of a prominent investment banker, a fixture in Atlanta's high society, and someone who measured her worth by the price tags of her possessions. Her designer handbag cost more than most people's monthly salary, her diamond tennis bracelet caught light from across the garage, and her expression carried the particular kind of entitlement that came from never having to worry about money. Thompson Auto Service was known throughout the city as one of the premier facilities for luxury vehicle maintenance. Located in an upscale area near several BMW and Mercedes dealerships, it catered to customers who owned expensive cars and expected exceptional service. The garage's reputation for quality work and attention to detail had built a clientele of wealthy professionals who trusted their investments to Marcus Thompson's expertise. Marcus Thompson was underneath a silver BMW sedan when Victoria's car pulled in, finishing up a complex diagnostic on the vehicle's electrical system. At 35, Marcus moved with the confident efficiency of someone who had spent years perfecting his craft. His coveralls were clean but well worn, bearing the marks of a professional who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty when precision work was required. What Victoria couldn't see from her vantage point was the MIT class ring on Marcus's finger, or the advanced diagnostic computer equipment that surrounded his workspace, or the multiple engineering certifications hanging in the small office area. She saw what her prejudices had trained her to see: a black man in work clothes who couldn't possibly understand the sophisticated engineering of her luxury vehicle. "Excuse me," Victoria called out, her voice carrying the sharp edge of someone accustomed to immediate attention. "I have an appointment for service on my BMW." Marcus slid out from under the sedan, wiping his hands on a clean rag as he approached Victoria's vehicle. He'd been expecting her. Thompson Auto Service scheduled appointments precisely, and Victoria Hamilton's X7 was on the morning's work list for routine maintenance and a software update. "Mrs. Hamilton," Marcus said with professional courtesy, "I'm Marcus Thompson. We spoke on the phone yesterday about your vehicle's service requirements." Victoria's expression shifted immediately upon hearing that this mechanic was claiming to be the person she'd spoken with. Her mental image of Marcus Thompson had been very different, and she wasn't prepared to accept that the professional voice she'd heard on the phone belonged to the black man standing before her. "I think there's been a mistake," Victoria said, her tone growing colder. "I spoke with Marcus Thompson, the owner of this establishment. I need to speak with him about my car." Marcus felt the familiar sting of recognition. This wasn't the first time a customer had refused to believe he could be the owner of Thompson Auto Service, and it probably wouldn't be the last. But he'd learned to handle these situations with patience and professionalism. "I am Marcus Thompson," he replied calmly. "I own Thompson Auto Service, and I'll be handling your vehicle's maintenance today." Victoria's incredulous laugh echoed through the garage. Several other employees, 2 mechanics working on nearby vehicles, and a service advisor at the front desk, paused their work to observe what was clearly becoming an uncomfortable situation. "That's impossible," Victoria declared. Marcus Thompson is a professional who runs a luxury auto service. He's not, she gestured vaguely at Marcus's coveralls and the tools in his hands. Look, I don't know who you think you're fooling, but I need to speak to the real owner. This is an $85,000 vehicle, and I'm not about to let just anyone put their hands on it. The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Marcus felt every eye in the garage turn toward them, and he could see his employees' expressions shift from curiosity to anger on his behalf. This was exactly the kind of situation he'd hoped to avoid, but Victoria's prejudice was making that impossible. "Mrs. Hamilton," Marcus said, his voice remaining steady despite the anger building in his chest, "I understand you want quality service for your vehicle. That's exactly what Thompson Auto Service provides. I have the credentials and experience necessary to maintain your BMW, and I can assure you that your car will receive the same expert attention we give to all our luxury vehicles." Victoria wasn't listening. She'd already decided that this black man couldn't possibly be qualified to work on her expensive car, and nothing he could say would change her mind. "I want to speak to your supervisor," Victoria demanded, "or the real owner, or someone who actually knows what they're doing with European automobiles. I didn't pay $85,000 for a car just to have it ruined by someone who probably learned to fix cars in some community college program." The racial undertones of her statement were unmistakable, and Marcus felt his professional composure being tested in ways he hadn't experienced in years. Around the garage, his employees had stopped pretending to work and were openly staring at the confrontation unfolding in their workspace. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice taking on a firmer edge, "I am the owner of this establishment. I have degrees in mechanical and automotive engineering from MIT, and I've worked for BMW's engineering division in Germany. Your vehicle will receive expert care, but I need you to treat my staff and me with basic respect." Victoria's expression suggested she found Marcus's claims about his credentials completely unbelievable. MIT, BMW engineering. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not falling for it. I want a real mechanic, not someone pretending to be something they're not." That's when Marcus's patience finally reached its limit. He built Thompson Auto Service from nothing, earning respect through skill and dedication. He'd overcome countless obstacles and prejudices to create one of the most successful luxury auto service businesses in the region. He wasn't going to stand in his own garage and be lectured about his qualifications by a customer whose understanding of automotive engineering probably extended no further than knowing where to put gasoline. "Hamilton," Marcus said, his voice now carrying unmistakable authority, "I'm going to ask you to leave. Take your vehicle and find service elsewhere. I don't work on cars for customers who can't treat my staff with dignity." Victoria's face turned red with indignation. "How dare you? I'm a paying customer, and I have every right to ensure that qualified people are working on my car. I'm not leaving until someone competent agrees to service my vehicle." "Then you'll be here a long time," Marcus replied, "because I'm the most qualified person in this garage, and I just refuse to work on your car." The standoff continued for several more uncomfortable minutes, with Victoria demanding to speak to managers who didn't exist and insisting that Marcus couldn't possibly be who he claimed to be. Finally, after threatening to leave negative reviews and contact the Better Business Bureau, Victoria stormed out of the garage, declaring that she would take her business to a professional establishment. As her BMW's engine started and she drove away without having her routine maintenance performed, Marcus's employees gathered around him with expressions of support and frustration. "Boss," said Jake Martinez, one of Marcus's senior technicians, "I can't believe she talked to you like that. You want me to call some of our other customers and warn them about her?" Marcus shook his head. "No, Jake, word will get around on its own if she keeps acting like that. Let's just get back to work and focus on the customers who appreciate quality service." But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria Hamilton's story wasn't over. In his experience, people who carried that level of entitlement and prejudice often found ways to create their own problems. And sometimes, the universe had a way of providing very expensive lessons to those who needed them most. 23 minutes later, Marcus's prediction proved prophetic. Victoria Hamilton was traveling north on Interstate 75, heading toward her weekly tennis lesson at the country club, when her BMW X7 suddenly began displaying warning lights across the dashboard. The engine temperature gauge climbed rapidly into the red zone. Steam began pouring from under the hood, and the luxury vehicle that had been running perfectly that morning started making ominous grinding noises. Victoria pulled onto the shoulder of the busy highway, her heart racing as she realized she was stranded in her expensive car that was now smoking and clearly in need of immediate mechanical attention. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her, but her primary concern was getting help as quickly as possible. She called her husband first, but he was in meetings and couldn't be reached. Her second call was to AAA, but they informed her that towing a vehicle to a specific repair facility would require a 2-hour wait. Her third call was to the BMW dealership, where she'd purchased the car, but they were booked solid and couldn't provide immediate roadside assistance. As traffic rushed past her disabled vehicle, Victoria began to understand the precarious nature of her situation. She was stranded on a busy highway in an expensive car that was clearly experiencing major mechanical problems, and she had very few options for immediate help. That's when she remembered the business card that had been left on her dashboard at Thompson Auto Service, the same card she'd crumpled up and thrown into her purse while declaring that she would never use their service. Victoria stared at the card for several minutes, realizing that the man she'd insulted and dismissed was probably her best option for getting immediate help. Thompson Auto Service was only 15 minutes away. They specialized in BMW vehicles, and unlike the dealership, they offered emergency roadside assistance. Swallowing her pride, Victoria dialed the number. Thompson Auto Service, this is Marcus speaking. The voice was professional and courteous, exactly as it had been when she'd first called to schedule her appointment. Victoria hesitated, knowing that she was about to ask for help from the very person she'd just humiliated. This is Victoria Hamilton. I was in your shop earlier today, and, well, my car has broken down on I-75. It's overheating badly, and I'm stranded. There was a brief pause before Marcus responded. I see. What's your exact location, Mrs. Hamilton? Victoria provided the mile marker and her position on the highway, expecting Marcus to refuse to help her or to remind her of how she'd treated him. Instead, his response was purely professional. I'll have a tow truck there in 20 minutes, Marcus said. We'll bring your vehicle back to the shop and diagnose the problem. Are you safe where you are, or do you need immediate assistance? I'm safe, Victoria replied, surprised by his willingness to help despite their earlier confrontation. But I don't understand why you're willing to help me after what happened this morning. Marcus's voice remained professional, but carried a subtle undertone that Victoria couldn't quite identify. Mrs. Hamilton, stranded motorists need help regardless of their personal opinions about mechanics. We'll see you soon. The tow truck arrived exactly 20 minutes later, operated by Thompson Auto Service and driven by Jake Martinez, the same technician who had witnessed Victoria's earlier tirade. Jake was professional but cool as he loaded Victoria's BMW onto the truck and offered her a ride back to the garage. Boss said to bring you back with the car, Jake explained. He wants to personally handle the diagnostic on your vehicle. The ride back to Thompson Auto Service was uncomfortable and silent. Victoria stared out the window, processing the fact that the man she'd insulted was not only helping her but was taking personal responsibility for fixing her car. The contradiction between her assumptions about Marcus and his actual behavior was becoming impossible to ignore. When they arrived at the garage, Marcus was waiting with a diagnostic computer and a detailed checklist. He approached Victoria's BMW with the same professional demeanor he'd shown earlier, but now Victoria was seeing him with different eyes. Let me take a look at what we're dealing with, Marcus said, connecting his diagnostic equipment to the vehicle's computer system. Within minutes, he'd identified the problem, a catastrophic failure of the cooling system's thermostat, complicated by a leak in the radiator that had caused the engine to overheat. Miss Hamilton, Marcus said, showing her the diagnostic readout on his computer screen. Your cooling system has failed completely. The thermostat is stuck closed, which caused your engine to overheat rapidly. Additionally, there's a small leak in your radiator that's been developing for several weeks. Victoria stared at the technical data, realizing that she couldn't understand any of the information Marcus was showing her. Is it serious? It could have been catastrophic if you'd continued driving, Marcus replied. Overheating can cause permanent engine damage that would cost $15,000 to repair. You were lucky to stop when you did. The implications of Marcus's words were starting to sink in. If she had insisted on having her routine maintenance performed elsewhere, if she had found another garage that missed the developing radiator leak, if she had continued driving when the overheating began, she could have destroyed her expensive vehicle's engine. How long will it take to fix? Victoria asked quietly. About 4 hours for the parts and labor, Marcus replied. We'll need to replace the thermostat, repair the radiator leak, and flush the entire cooling system. It's detailed work, but it's well within our capability. Victoria found herself in the surreal position of watching the man she'd insulted work expertly on her expensive car, using sophisticated diagnostic equipment and demonstrating a level of technical knowledge that put her earlier assumptions to shame. Marcus moved through the repair process with the confident efficiency of someone who clearly understood every aspect of B&W engineering. As the hours passed, Victoria remained at the garage, observing Marcus and his team work on her vehicle. She watched him explain complex technical procedures to his employees, saw him reference technical manuals and computer databases, and witnessed the obvious respect his staff had for his expertise. Mrs. Hamilton, Marcus said as he completed the final stages of the repair, I want to show you something. He led her to his office where the walls were covered with diplomas, certifications, and photographs from his career. His MIT degrees were prominently displayed, along with certificates from BMW's technical training programs and photos of him working at BMW's engineering facilities in Germany. I spent 5 years working for BMW as a senior engineer, Marcus explained. I helped design some of the cooling systems and engine management software in vehicles like yours. When I decided to start my own business, I brought that expertise with me. Victoria stared at the credentials, feeling the full weight of her mistake. I had no idea. No, Marcus replied. You didn't, and that's exactly the problem. You saw a black man in coveralls and assumed he couldn't possibly be qualified to work on your car. You dismissed my credentials, questioned my competence, and insulted my professionalism based solely on your prejudices. The truth of his words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Mr. Thompson, I owe you an apology. I was wrong, and I'm ashamed of how I acted. Marcus nodded. I appreciate that, Mrs. Hamilton. But I want you to understand that this isn't just about me. Every day, qualified professionals are judged by their appearance rather than their abilities. Every day, people make assumptions about what others are capable of based on race, age, or appearance. Those assumptions hurt people, and, as you've learned today, they can hurt the people making them as well. Victoria's B&W was running perfectly when Marcus finished the repairs. The cooling system functioned flawlessly. The engine temperature remained stable, and all the diagnostic readings showed optimal performance. Marcus had not only fixed the immediate problem, but had also identified and corrected several minor issues that could have caused future problems. There's no charge for today's service, Marcus said as he handed Victoria her keys. Victoria stared at him in amazement. No charge? But you spent hours working on my car. You provided emergency roadside assistance, and you prevented thousands of dollars in engine damage. Consider it a learning experience, Marcus replied, for both of us. As Victoria drove away from Thompson Auto Service, her car running better than it had in months, she couldn't stop thinking about the lesson she'd learned. Marcus Thompson had every right to refuse to help her, to charge her premium rates for emergency service, or to remind her of the humiliation she'd caused. Instead, he'd provided expert service at no charge and had done so with grace and professionalism. The story of Victoria's experience at Thompson Auto Service spread quickly through her social circle, but not in the way she might have expected. Instead of complaining about poor service, she found herself telling friends about the exceptional expertise and character of Marcus Thompson. Her own prejudices had been so thoroughly exposed and corrected that she became an advocate for the garage she'd initially wanted to avoid. 6 months later, Thompson Auto Service had gained dozens of new customers through Victoria's recommendation. She had become one of Marcus's most loyal clients, bringing all her vehicles to his shop and referring friends who owned luxury cars. The relationship between Victoria and Marcus had evolved from confrontation to mutual respect, built on the foundation of a lesson learned through experience rather than lecture. Marcus continued to operate Thompson Auto Service with the same commitment to excellence that had built his reputation. But Victoria's story became part of his approach to handling prejudiced customers, not with anger or retaliation, but with professionalism and the confidence that quality work would ultimately speak louder than assumption. The lesson was profound and personal. Respect shouldn't be contingent on someone's appearance or your preconceived notions about their capabilities. Excellence comes in many forms, and the most qualified person in the room might not look like what you expect. Sometimes the universe provides expensive lessons about the cost of prejudice, and sometimes those lessons arrive in the form of a broken-down car and the humbling realization that the person you dismissed is exactly the person you need. For Victoria Hamilton, the experience was transformative. She'd learned that her assumptions about race and competence were not only wrong but potentially costly. For Marcus Thompson, it was another confirmation that patience and professionalism were more powerful tools for changing minds than anger or confrontation. And for everyone who heard the story, it served as a reminder that judging people by their appearance is not just morally wrong, it's practically stupid, because you never know when you might need the help of the very person you've chosen to underestimate. If this story moved you, remember that expertise and character aren't determined by appearance. The next time you find yourself making assumptions about someone's capabilities based on how they look or what they're wearing, think about Victoria Hamilton and her broken-down beat, because sometimes the person you need most is the person you're most likely to dismiss, and sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that teach us the true cost of our prejudices.